Hello, we are live. Hello, audience. This is the Gauntlet New User Orientation. We are going to take you, new Gauntleteers, welcome to the Gauntlet, and we're going to take you through a little tour. So the two of us who are going to take you on this tour today, one of them is me. My name is Tomer. You can also call me Tomes. Also, if you're trying to say Tomer and it comes out in some other manner like Tomer or Tomar, that's fine. I'm good with all that. So that's me. I am a member of the Gauntlet. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm part of the community care. And this is just going to be a little bit of a tour. I'll have my partner here introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Garrett, he, him. Garrett is a German name. I'm from Germany. Well, it's actually a Dutch name. The German version would be Gerhard, Gareth. But Garrett is like what Germans try to give their children as name, although the proper pronunciation is Gerrit. Gerrit is too complicated. I'm currently in Guatemala. Here I call myself Lutz. This is where I live with my family. And Lutz is much easier because it resembles the Tsutuhil Mayan word Utz, which means good. Everything is fine. And Lutz as Utz is somehow the way I introduce myself here, and I hope people go along with it. I'm also part of the community, and I'm picking questions. If there are any coming up, there's a chat in our live chat, and I would bring them in and tell Tomer that there are any in. Yeah, I welcome as well every new member because that makes me glad.
Awesome. So yeah, let's get started. First of all, you're here listening to this probably because you've joined the Gauntlet and you are now part of joining this community. We are very proud of our community, and we do want to wish you like a warm welcome. But you know, we know it's also a little bit complicated. Like, what is the Gauntlet? That's what we're going to talk about during this thing. But before we do, let's talk about the inclusivity policy. So joining into our space, one of the things you're tacitly agreeing to here is that you will abide by our inclusivity policy. And this is something that we wrote up, and it has a couple of components, and we're very proud of it. So the inclusivity policy has a couple of guidelines. The first is when we are talking to our fellow Gauntleteers, we should always try to assume best intentions, right? As far as what people are saying, it's difficult in an online space with chatting. You know, sometimes you don't see the person's face. You might not know them that well. And it can be easy to misinterpret what things people say, you know, or they might come off as very harsh when maybe we don't know, you know, what emotional state they're in. That's the internet. But here we're going to try to assume best intentions. So we start on that good foot. We also try to act with integrity and kindness. That's a very important part of our culture space and our play culture. We care about each other as much as the games, more so than the games, I should say. And we try to maintain a safe space. And part of that, as we'll see, is there are a number of safety tools that are out there. We try to play with safety tools in our games. You know, what safety tool a GM or facilitator or an MC will decide to use, that's up to them during their game, but it is something that we really try to encourage here. And that's even outside of the games, like within the community space. So the last thing is just be a good citizen. I think most of us know what that is, but you know, we have this written out a little bit in more detail in the inclusivity policy itself. The one thing you do need to know is we will not tolerate any harassment of any kind, you know, for for any of the various reasons. And you know, we're actually very proud of the fact that that our space caters to a wide variety of people, right? We have very specifically opened up specific spots to get more, you know, women, people of color, and other folks from very widespread communities into this space. So with that said, some of you may be familiar with playing games with strangers online or at game conventions, or even in your own home space when you're introducing new people to your groups. One of the things that helps facilitate that is safety tools. And so we have a bunch of them that we recommend. I'll show you a link where we kind of point to them momentarily. But the X card is kind of like, you know, one of the basics, the open door policy, lines and veils, script change tool. And we have links to these in the Gauntlet page if you're not familiar with them. Also, your GM in the beginning of the game, the facilitator, should be going over these policies with you. If for some reason they say like, hey, we're playing with the X card, everybody cool? Yep, okay, let's move on. And you don't know what the X card is and you haven't played with it, raise your hand. Just go, oh, wait, can you please explain that? You will not regret it. It's very important for all of us to understand, you know, these tools that we play with. Actually, before I head over there to the next slide, Garrett, is there anything that you'd like to add as far as welcoming these people to the space? Did I miss anything here?
I mean, we come back to that on the Slack, and I think feeling comfortable in the Slack, which is a very important part of the community, that is something we will cover in more detail. And that you feel safe and welcome there, that is the most important part, I would say, in terms of how the inclusivity policy actually comes into place. Like, we all have our routines about how games work. Most of us have. We can still improve there, but working and functioning as a community is going further than just playing games.
Awesome. Well said. Thank you. So what is the rest of this tour going to look like? Here's a little bit of an agenda, right? First of all, we'll talk about what the Gauntlet is, because there's a lot of components. And sometimes people are confused. They go, oh, I thought the Gauntlet was a podcast, or, oh, I thought it was just this online gaming calendar. So depending on how you found us, you may only be familiar with certain aspects of the Gauntlet. So we'll just show you like a little bit of what's there. We'll talk about the Gauntlet FAQ, which is a document out there you can view, which gives you kind of the basics and rundown. We'll look at the Patreon, the Slack, which is like the heart of the community. We'll look at the Discord and what it's used for, and a little bit of the Gauntlet Hangout calendar. So let's do this, right? We'll start with what is the Gauntlet. So the Gauntlet itself, if you go to the main page, that's gauntlet-rpg.com, you'll get kind of a splash screen where it shows you some of the main things, right? All of those, as you see in the image on the slide there, those are all links. So the Gauntlet consists of, for example, a blog. We have a daily blog that started about 6 months ago, or more recently, but this is a new thing. We have podcasts. There are half a dozen of them, more if you consider some of the deprecated ones, and a lot of actual play recordings. So those are released through iTunes or other podcatchers. There's Gauntlet Hangouts. That's our calendar, our online calendar. This is another huge part of the community, right? Is that we constantly play games with each other. One of the most vital aspects of kind of our space, right? And then there is the Codex. So some of you may be familiar with the Codex zine, which has now been going for almost 3 years, into its 3rd year. And the Codex is a monthly zine that the Gauntlet puts out. Part of what it includes is submissions from the community, right? So designers and just players and other gamers within our Gauntlet community have added articles, short one-shots, custom playbooks, all sorts of other things. And that is our Codex zine, right? So you may be familiar with that. As a Patreon member and as a Gauntleteer, you will have access to the Codex zine. So that's going to be part of this package. And then there is GauntletCon. So we opened up and ran an amazing online game convention 2 years running now, and it has been fantastic and growing every time. And finally, we have the little community page there. And so that last link, that's kind of what I want to show you next, right? So if you go down to the kind of like community portal, then there's a couple of things. There is a link to the Gauntlet Community FAQ. great place to start. There is a link to the inclusivity policy that we just looked at a minute ago. And there's also things like an online play aids folder. So if, you know, like with online character sheets and all that kind of stuff, and contact us information. If I drilled into the FAQ, or if I go to it directly with that URL that you see here on the slide, right? There's a very simple URL there. Then you get to the Gauntlet FAQ. And that Gauntlet FAQ is just kind of the most frequently asked questions that we get, things that come up over and over again with new members when they come into the community. You know, where do I find the calendar? What if I go there and I don't have the priority flag, you know, little button? What if I, you know, want to play games? What should I know before I get in there? Will somebody get a hold of me? How do I run games? Like, all these questions are answered in this FAQ. And in fact, you can see here, this is one of the pages, right, on playing games. It talks about what do you need, what's required, what's recommended, and all sorts of other stuff. Plenty of links. Additionally, if you ever are using this document and you find something's wrong or out of place, you can add comments to it, and that will immediately flag some of the authors, including us. You know, feel free to do that or get in touch with us. There's some contact information up there at the top. So that is our FAQ. Cool. Next thing here is a little tour of our Slack. So Slack is a messaging platform. You know, you can think of it kind of like a work chat room with, you know, like kind of various tools, right, for communication, making groups and channels and all sorts of stuff like that. The Gauntlet uses this as its kind of primary chat vehicle and communication vehicle with the core community, right? The Slack is not free. Access to the Slack means you have gone, you know, high enough on your Patreon tier. So there are free communities of the Gauntlet out there in G+ and Facebook. We'll see that a little bit later. But the Slack is something that you do have to pay at a certain level to get into. Now, once you go there and, you know, and you've paid into that Patreon tier, you should get a verification from you know, the Gauntlet's email. And when you join, you are going to see something like this, right? This is kind of what Slack looks like as a web app, right? And when you get in there, there'll be a couple of channels over there on the left-hand side, right? And you might get this friendly message from a Slack bot or from one of us in the community. Normally, when a new member comes in, we try to aggressively welcome them, make sure that they understand that they can ask any questions if they're confused, because some people have never used the software before. And there's this little greeting that pops up there, which tries to give you some of the basic information, a little bit of a rundown, but it might be a lot to take in all at once. So what you'll notice here is that on the left-hand side of this window is going to be things like channels and you know, viewing threads and things like that. And then over on the right-hand side, you're going to see, you know, whatever the chat is that's been going on. So, and that's what we see circled there, right, is some of the channels. Now, in my image, I showed you a screenshot from my user. I blurred out a bunch of channels. When you first come in here, there's only actually going to be very few that you're going to be a part of, right? And in fact, let's take a look at some of those, right? So welcome to Gauntlet. That's the channel where most people will kind of greet you initially. And that's the best place to ask any questions. If you've never used Slack before, or maybe it has nothing to do with Slack. Maybe you're just like, hey, I joined, how do I sign up for games? Or what do I do here? Or, you know, how do I get in touch with my friend who got me in here? Like, whatever it is, you know, feel free to ask us those questions. There's some other channels here. There's an announcements channel, which is for official announcements only. We should avoid chattering in there. There's the community discussion channel. That one is really where we talk about community-specific issues about the Gauntlet community, right? Or make certain kinds of announcements are sometimes done in there. There's also the random channel. This is just general non-Gauntlet stuff. And another very popular channel, which we don't see on here, is the RPG chat channel. So between RPG chat and random, that's where a lot of the day-to-day discussion happens. But then under that, we see the G_Hangouts. That is where game announcements happen. And so that, again, is only for game announcements. So some of these channels are for like just chit chat. Everybody can do whatever they want. Some are a little bit like set up to be like official things, as we'll see in a minute. There's a reason for it. But there aren't too many of them. Those are the main ones that you see here. And then there's a bunch of other user-created channels that people have put together for different communities and stuff, which we'll see. Garrett?
And very importantly, nobody will slaughter you if you post something into a channel where it doesn't belong to. Simply, you can ask, you can make mistakes. People will usually tell you afterwards, but that's the worst what can happen. And you don't even have to delete it. I mean, we all make mistakes, and this Slack is our conversation tool. And sometimes these things happen, and you put something in announcements and forgot that it's just for official announcements. And well, nothing else will happen. And you will learn sooner or later if you don't use Slack as often as some people do. For some, it became such a home that this is their first place to go whenever they connect. But for others who don't that often connect to it, it's good to have certain channels which they need to check and nothing else and know what's going on. And this is why there's a formal structure.
Awesome. Thank you, Garrett. Cool. So what's one of the first things I might do when I get in here? So, down in on the left-hand side at the top, you'll see all the channels. Down below, you can also send direct messages, to a specific user, including yourself. Over on the right, what we see here on this slide is our keywords. So one of the things that Slack allows us to do is it allows us to make little special words. And when somebody writes that, something will come up. And this is almost like help. Think of it as like a help tool. We've created some special words there. Like, for example, you can see here at the top, I typed GauntletFAQ. And if somebody types all those letters all in a row, it will come back and give you a little bit of information about the Gauntlet FAQ. Where can you find it, right? Oh, maybe it's pinned to certain channels. There's a direct URL to it. The second keyword we see there is Slack pronoun. Slack, the way we use it, we don't have a paid plan, so we don't have the ability to add like a pronoun field to our users. So if you type that, it'll give you some hints as to how you can work around it. Where can you put your pronoun that it's visible? Given that Slack doesn't have a field for us. So, these are questions that have come up over and over again, and these are just kind of like bite-sized little helps that can help you out here. In the welcome message, when you first join Slack, there's actually a list of all of these. So you can kind of get a sense of, oh, these are things that I can do, right? And I can actually get help immediately from the Slack help itself. Some of these are about working in Slack, like Slack pronoun. But the other one down below you'll see is paint the scene. Paint the scene is, a kind of methodology or whatever that, Jason is talked about on the Gauntlet podcasts and in the blog. And he talks about how he has used that method and created, structure around that method. So this little keyword here, that tells you where to find information about this thing, right? Because it comes up a lot in the Gauntlet, right? So there's a bunch of these little tools to help you. The one thing I'm going to mention is you can use these keywords in the Welcome to the Gauntlet channel. So, and that'll be seen publicly by everyone in that channel, but that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with using the tool there, and other people may have the same question or didn't know that that tool existed. So, feel free to do it there. Or you can send it in a direct message to yourself. So if you kind of want to lurk and you're like, I don't want to be in this public space and making all this noise, you can jump into your own direct message to yourself, and you can use any of these keywords and it'll show you that information. So that's a kind of more private way to do it. Now, some of these channels are very useful and important. An example is the G Hangouts channel. That one is where people announce new games. Games fill up quickly sometimes. And so some people want to be on top of the situation. When somebody posts a new game, you want a notification on your phone right then, right? if that's the case, if that's you, and it's not everyone, but if that's you, what you can do is you can turn on notifications in Slack. And here you can see that's dealing with general Slack notifications, is that little bell thing. But if I go to the little gear icon over there on the right in a specific channel, like the G Hangouts channel, and then go down and choose notification preferences, that's where I can set preferences for this specific channel, right? So maybe I don't want to get a phone notification for all the chatter that happens on here on a daily basis, but for Gauntlet game posts, that one you do. And that's why we have kind of rules around some of these channels. Like the G Hangouts channel, that's the one people put notification on so that when a game gets posted, they'll get something like strongly notified. So we discourage people from using that channel for anything except for posting games, right? So it's not a channel to go in and kind of just start chatting. Otherwise, a bunch of people will get notified for no reason. But again, like Garrett said, you make a mistake, it's all good. You know, nobody's gonna get hurt.
For those who know Discord, Slack has the advantage of threading. So whenever you need to discuss something about a game, you just thread and nobody will get notifications in the main channel.
That's right. And that's actually a very good point for the G Hangouts channel, because somebody will post a game and sometimes you want to ask questions about it, right? Or you want to notify them that, hey, you know, you said it was every other Monday, but you actually put the same date for 2 of the sessions or something. You can actually thread that. You just basically reply. Threading is just replying to it instead of starting its own little conversation. And yeah, people won't be notified. So Slack is pretty clever that way. And again, if you have any questions about this, if some of this isn't clear, you can feel free to reach out to us later. So we've got our notifications. On the right side here, by the way, is a screenshot from the phone, right? So setting your notification in your web app links to desktop notifications in Windows or whatever you're using. But if you want it on your phone, then you have to go into the Slack app on your phone and set notifications there as well. Yeah, Garrett, did you have something?
Tomer, do we only have RPG chat, G Hangouts, announcements? And random, or is there more?
No, there is more. There is so much more. And we're going to talk about that right now. So in the channel section over on the left, when you first get there, it might look a little dead because you're going to walk in and you're going to belong to like 5 channels, right? The default announcements and whatever, right? But if you hit that little plus sign there, if you click on the channels word, I think the plus sign has you add a new channel, which you can do as well. But if you click on channels, then what it'll do is it'll allow you to browse all the existing channels. You can see some of them here. But specifically, and thank you, Garrett, for giving us this slide, these are some of the channels that are out there, right? And there's a lot of them. We don't put you in all this stuff by default because these are all opt-in, right? Is this something that you are interested in? And some of these things, you know, are very active and busy. Some of them are not, right? It depends on, you know, maybe it's just waiting for critical mass, or sometimes there's little quiet periods. But there's a very lively channel culture in the Gauntlet. I will say some of these you can see as on the slide, you know, things that have to do with different hobbies, right? Whether that's art or books or things like that. If you want to dive deeper into the RPG community, there's RPG chat and RPG industry and, you know, other channels, kids and RPGs, right? So there's like little sub channels there. Design feedback, for example. There's also channels that have to do with language and time zone. So there's a Deutsch channel if you want to speak German and talk about German games and maybe running German games, right? Games in German. There is a Latin America channel, an Asia Pacific channel, Greenwich Mean Time. These channels are almost like location dependent, right? And they basically give you a group of people that are in roughly the same time zone. The best part about it is you don't have to be in Greenwich Mean Time to be in the Greenwich Mean Time channel. So I, for example, have time frames that I can play, which are in the middle of the US day. And that coincides with when they play games. So sometimes you just want to look at these channels as, are these people that I can game with or that I want to communicate with around one of these topics? So there's plenty of them, and they're constantly active. As we said, this is kind of the heart of the community.
And then there are all these custom emojis, and for me, they are one of the most beautiful signs how much the Slack has become home of the Gauntlet community and what kind of mutual culture we have created in the last years. Because each of these emojis, which you can see there, somehow has its history and is used with certain cultural knowledge, for new people might be possibly a little bit overwhelming, but you don't need to understand each and everything what happens with emojis there. They are a wonderful way to express in a micro-engagement way your interaction. And I promise you, nobody understands all of them. I just look at them as confused as you do, I think.
Awesome. So some other Slack techniques. We talked about one of them is threading. It's a huge part of kind of the way we use Slack in general. And that just means that when somebody asks a question, like in this case, we see, our friend Jason asking, where do I do a certain thing, right? Is there a channel for plugging certain stuff? Instead of just replying in the main window where each reply will be kind of like a separate notified thing. And sometimes the conversation can become very messy and hard to follow questions and answers because everything's mushed together. This is kind of what Discord looks like, right? And that works really well for certain kinds of spaces, but for trying to carry on conversations where a lot of things are going on at the same time, it can be very difficult. And threading in Slack is just one of the highlights, and we use it very, very strongly in a lot of the community space. So for example, here, I actually, went and replied in thread, to that message. And that way anybody interested, kind of like can follow and get the answer quickly, but that conversation doesn't become a spaghetti mess around all these other conversations that are happening. You can also, by the way, once you've started responding to a thread, you get notified on any further response in your like unread threads area. And there's also even a way where instead of having to reply to get notifications, you can subscribe to that thread very easily and then get notified whenever things are added. Maybe it's a very interesting topic to you, even if you're not engaging in it, right?
And I would like to add that because you interestingly say that it's great to have threading if you discuss many things at the same time. It also helps, since we are such an international community with every time zone represented, it helps a lot with asynchronous conversations. So you can just enter a conversation a day later and still contribute to it, and the conversation hasn't moved on already somewhere else. That is sometimes really nice to have a little bit more profound conversations, as you might have them in other social media contexts. And yeah, I personally, for example, appreciate that a lot.
I think that's an excellent point. And I know 100% I empathize and know what you mean there, because we have a very international community. So there is a big contingent in different parts of Asia, a large contingent in different parts of Europe and Latin America. And so that slow conversation, like over a day, you will see a conversation morph when, a couple hours later, suddenly these people are kind of online and it's like boom, 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 right? So a conversation that might have started, for the Europeans, like suddenly it gets really hot for the US people in that time zone, later in the day, right? And it's enabled. You can't really do that easily in Discord, right? The conversation just kind of like moves on. But here, yeah, you can engage in those micro conversations. So great point. Another thing is, when you're actually replying in a message, any message, or creating a message, you can also @ people. So using the @ sign, you can, it gives you kind of like the little directory, the list of people, and you can tag somebody into a conversation and they will get notified about that. Of course, you kind of, you're pulling people in where they may or may not want to be. So you always use that with caution. But most of the time, the idea is, this is something that interests them, right? I mean, and so just know that this is a tool that can be used. You can also, as you can see in the message above, in my reply there, you can use hashes, right, or the #, and it will bring up a list of channels. So, for example, in this case, I was telling Jason a couple of channels that might be useful to them, right? And so if if anybody clicked on those channels, it would take you straight there, even if you haven't subscribed to it. Another thing that Garrett was mentioning was the emojis. And yeah, we have some strong emoji culture in here. I mean, there's the default Slack emojis, which are great. And then there's been all this stuff which has been added. And as you can see, you know, sometimes people get enthusiastic. And so when they see messages that they're excited about, emoji it up, feel free to. Yeah, anything else to say about that, Garrett?
Well, the most important part is behind the hash sign. This is where the custom emojis are. Yeah. And what I appreciate is that we have like all colors for the emojis available. So any skin tone, etc., is all in there. That wasn't the case for a long time. And now you can customize that however you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, and be creative with using emojis. I just recommend using emojis as much as you can. People feel appreciated, feel accepted, and yeah, it's just, especially with new people, I think it's good to show them your contribution is highly appreciated and welcomed. Please continue to participate actively here.
Yep. And if you do, like you notice the little like emoji example on the slide there, if you do float over any of these or click on them down below, it kind of tells you what they are, because like sometimes it might be confusing, like you don't know what the expression is supposed to mean. And if it says down there sad face, then it becomes obvious, right? But anyways, I don't need to teach you emojis. I feel like an old man. All right, next, let's talk about our Patreon. Right, so the Gauntlet has a Patreon, and the Patreon consists of all these people out here as part of the community who have decided to put in some amount of money each month to help the Gauntlet run. It is an expensive venture. There are a lot of podcasts. There is website costs for managing our gaming calendar and other things like that. And there's the Codex publishing, arm, the Gauntlet publishing arm, which is working on Codex, but starting to bring up other games as well. We had our first successful Kickstarter recently. So, I mean, there's Gauntlet Con, which is the game convention, which runs. All this stuff is funded by the Patreon. So if you go to the Gauntlet Patreon page, you will see something like this. You can see the Gauntlet is creating podcasts, game events, and zines, right? And right here, you can even see a recent post, and this is where the Gauntlet zine is placed for you to download it as a user. So once you have gone to that Patreon level where you are getting the zine, you would be going to the Patreon page to get that zine. And it's announced at the beginning of every month. So there are different tiers of patrons, right? So depending on how much you pay in, you kind of have access to different sets of stuff. At one of the lowest levels is a $2 level, which does like some basic support. But the Codex Keeper is usually the one we find most people have as the minimum, right? The Codex Keeper is $4 a month. It gives you access to the Gauntlet Codex, and you get that monthly zine. Old issues, you can actually pick those up as well now out in Drive-Thru RPG. We post them a couple of months kind of behind schedule. So about 3 months down the track, you'll see a couple of more of the older zines show their faces there. The zines, I think, come out to about $5 a piece. So you're getting them a little bit cheaper and much earlier using the Patreon. But if you do join us now, you only really get access to Codex starting at your pledge. So all the old ones you could go back and get at Drive-Thru. So that's something to be aware of. The next tier up, oh yeah, Garrett?
But there's one very important secret spot when to join. That's just exactly between the months, because then you get 2 Codex issues usually. Jason is taking care for that. And yeah, find that sweet spot to join the Gauntlet and never miss the first of the month.
Nice, pro tip. Then we've got the next tier up is $6 a month right now, and that's the Slack Discord friend. So at this point, you would have access to the zine as well as the Slack. So you'd be joining us in the Slack community, which we saw earlier in the video. After that, we've got $1 higher. It's the $7 level is the Hangouts friend, right? And the Hangouts is our priority sign up for our calendar. A lot of the games are very popular, and most of them fill up within minutes, if not hours. But what happens is after 1 week, so the first week, people at the $7 or higher pledge level, they have priority sign up. After that first week, anybody can sign up for games. So we do very heavily support an open table culture. But part of what kind of like mitigates the demand is, you know, people who are supporting the community do get priority to sign up. One of the disadvantages, of course, is that we only have so much space and GMs running games. That is, our capacity is growing by bounds. But right now, we kind of have limited and slowly upped the number of people who can have that priority sign up. So just a year ago, it was like 50 or so. Then it went up to 150. Now you can see there 225 patrons. These are the ones who've paid $7 to come in and have that high priority sign up, right? When somebody drops out of that pledge, then another one opens up. So you will sometimes see openings here. And the Gauntlet Twitter is notorious for sending out kind of notifications saying like, hey, 2 spots are coming up soon, you know, watch the page, that kind of thing.
What should be mentioned is usually they have first announced the open spots internally in the Slack. So those who are already on the $6 pledge have a pretty good chance to upgrade on $7 if they also would like to game heavily. I mean, there's enough space for everybody to game, so it's not important to have these $7. It's just if you want to do the hype, then hype games, Hangouts Friends is your friend.
Yes. Awesome. And even if you are either on the, like you have the priority sign up, but you got to a game too late, or if you're just on the freebie plan and you're signing up like a week after the fact, a lot of times we have waiting lists and a lot of people get pulled in from the waiting list statistically. So we do have people drop games. So do not be bashful at signing up on a waiting list. Sometimes you do get into those games, even when they're super highly popular games. Sometimes people are signing up a month or even 2 months ahead of time for the games. And by the time the games come up, they find out they actually can't make it. So that does happen. Waiting list is your friend. So we talked about those levels. The next level up is the $10 inclusivity friend level. This one is where some people pledge at a higher level so they can bring in somebody from a marginalized community. That could be women, people of color, you know, different queer communities, as well as financially challenged communities. So all of those count as a marginalized community. And if somebody's at that tier, they're basically bringing somebody in. We've also limited the number there, again, just to hold our capacity. But earlier this year, that tier opened up and we only had 15 slots, and we opened another 15 later in the year. It's all a matter of, you know, us slowly increasing our capacity. So we talked Slack. We've talked about our Patreon. Discord is not used as heavily in the Gauntlet community, but it is used for some very specific things. I'm just showing you here, if you are in Slack and you ever want to then join the Discord, you can type Gauntlet Discord and it gives you some information, including an invitation link. The invitation link does expire sometimes. So if it does, just ask us for a new one and we'll fix this thing up. But once you get into Discord, if you've used that before, it's another computer or phone application, another chat platform similar to Slack in some ways, but also we found didn't work for us for some of the community communication. But we still use it, right? So here you can see our Gauntlet Slack. And our Gauntlet Discord. And there are a number of channels there. There's some for general discussion and things like that. But what you'll find that this is used for more often in the Gauntlet is for things like debrief. So some people will finish doing like Gauntlet Hangouts or a Roll20 session. And instead of doing debrief there, sometimes they'll jump out and then jump into here and do audio debrief. It's kind of almost a way in the virtual world of changing rooms, right? Or changing your environment. So sometimes you'll see people using it for debrief, sometimes for just ad hoc design chats, play storms. non-RPG type stuff. Some people play video games and other things with other members of the community. And this is a popular, platform to help facilitate some of that. And we've got Gauntlet Games now. This is a fairly recent thing, which has been added to the Gauntlet, where we basically do like a games on demand approach. Instead of people signing up in advance for a scheduled game, you show up just like at Games on Demand at some of these game conventions, indie Games on Demand, and you show up and people have volunteered to maybe run certain games, and we see what people get into. Right? It's all based on how many players show up and how many GMs we have and that kind of thing. And what this really does is it lets people get into games without. It's another way to get into games that are sometimes very difficult to get into. Right, Garrett?
And finally, to me, it feels like a micro online convention. It's like a mini convention. You get together with people, you hang out in the chat in between, before and after. Everybody is a little bit excited about it. And yeah, it's a community event. So it's much more than just a different form to organize games, but it also helps to get bonding through the community. And it's an opportunity as a GM to step up and say, I like to put something on the calendar spontaneously. I didn't dare to do so on the calendar yet, but here I am now. And there we go.
Yeah, no, great points. And in fact, in recent games that I've run there, I found that about half of the people who played in the game had not played a Gauntlet game yet. So they found this was a very easy way to get a game that they can get into, immediately start feeling it out, like what are the other people like here? What are the games like? So even if you have trouble getting into some of those scheduled games when you first get in, consider this as another opportunity, right, for bonding with some of our community people. One thing I will want to highlight is over there in the screenshot over on the left, we can see it's circled around the Gauntlet icon. Just below that is the Gauntlet Con icon. So Gauntlet Con 2018 was our online game convention. It happened about 2 months ago. And during that time, we opened up a specific Gauntlet Con Discord space. Discord works really well, we found, for just kind of the chatter that you expect to see at a game convention. And so whenever Gauntlet Con comes around, Discord is hopping, and that thing is busy all weekend long while the game convention is going. It really feels like you're at the lobby of a game convention and chit-chatting with all sorts of different people who, maybe you haven't signed up for games with, just building that excitement, talking about what they have and haven't played, what they're excited for. So it's a really wonderful space when Gauntlet Con comes along. It almost feels like right now it's normally a little bit like arid desert, and then the big rains come and all the flowers bloom. So really, really busy during Gauntlet Con. So you want to sign up for games. So we've got our Gauntlet Hangouts and our online calendar of games. You can see the URL here. We use Firebase app to manage some of that. And when you get there, what you're going to do is you want to join the community here. You have to give an email address. I think maybe it needs to be a Gmail account, although I'm not 100% sure. But I believe it has to be like a Gmail address or a Google account, I should say, associated email address. And once you do that and you have been let in, which you will, there's no payment required here to join us for games. There's only payment required if you want the high priority access, right? But to get in there, you can see some tabs up across the top. You can look at, what games you're signed up for, what are the events that are available, what is like a calendar view, which we'll see in a second, all of that. So, the calendar view will show you how many games are running on a given day. And by the way, this is our current December. I mean, Garrett, this is like bonkers, right? Like, look at how many games are running.
Every dot is one game, and this is just the calendar.
So we've got games here, days that where like 8 or 9 games are running, right? And this is December during the holiday season, so pretty fantastic. By clicking on those days, by the way, it will show you kind of like the list of games. So this is what it would look like if I wanted to look at all the events. And you'll notice here it's kind of like formatted in a web page, but there's an Excel table button there that lets you look at it in a little more of like a formatted format. So depending on how you'd like to view the information. One of the things you can see here is that we've clicked on the column that says % RSVP'd. This is showing us which games are empty, basically. Like, it's showing us how full the games are, right? How many spaces have been RSVP'd. So if it says 75%, 3 of the 4 seats possibly have been signed up for this game, but there's an empty seat, right? So this is a very easy way of seeing what games you can get into, right? Instead of scrolling through this huge list of games that are full, like, see what's available, get into those first, and then you can kind of check out the waiting list for some of these other things, right?
And I mean, be warned that the software is not perfect. Like, for example, the way the games are sorted doesn't always make sense, possibly, to you. But we constantly improve that. Like, part of the Patreon money goes into improving that software at the moment. And there are a couple of things we have registered and collected and put into the next version of it. So it's an ongoing process to improve the usefulness of the calendar. But as it is already a huge improvement to all the tools we tried before. Gauntlet was at Meetup before. And now, with such an amount of games, it was necessary to have its own software. Very nice thing for people who travel or who are in weird time zones. Sometimes this is always exactly the time zone you are currently in. So no worries about what do they mean, what is 12 p.m. and where I am now. And it perfectly makes sense. It sends out reminders when you are on a game. And so anytime you should be aware of where you are, in which games, and in which time zone.
Awesome. Yes, we're pretty happy with our system. Like Garrett said, there are problems, but we have an ongoing list of things to fix. So that's always nice. Going to the My Account tab or directly to the URL here, you can actually see if you have priority sign up or not. So it'll say something like Patreon member. That way you know that when you can sign up as soon as the game is out. If you don't have that and you're just kind of like a free user, then when you go to a game to try to sign up, it won't let you, right? The button will be kind of like grayed out until a week has gone by and the all access time is open. Then you'd be able to sign up. Now, if you've paid and you are a Patreon member at the $7 or higher level, or whatever agreement you've come to, you think you should have high priority sign up, and you do not have that button, that Patreon member button, then get in touch with us. Send an email to, gauntletrpg@gmail.com, or in the Slack, just contact one of us or go to the Welcome to Gauntlet channel and just ask a couple questions there. Sometimes it needs to be activated, and you will have had to create your account first by going in here. Before then, we go and upgrade it to high priority access, and then you can do that thing. So just keep in touch with us if another one that you'll see there that on this screenshot is the event creator button. So this is a screenshot from my account. If you have run games for us and you have now been authorized to run games, or you have been authorized, then you are an event creator. Not anybody can just go in and start creating games. So that's something that we have to switch on for you. We do highly recommend you play a couple of games to try to get a feel for the play culture before you start going in and running your own stuff. And that also gets people to know who you are. So people are like, okay, oh yeah, I've played with that guy or that, that person. Once you kind of get that social capital, then people see you, decide to run a game, they're really willing to sign up for it, right? So it kind of helps to be part of the space. But when you do need that event creator access, just ask any of our community leaders here, and we'll figure it out. There is also training for new GMs that happens and gets scheduled in the Gauntlet, so watch out for that. One other thing I wanted to show here is if you go down below, like this would be a list of all the games down there, and you can see that here I'm signed up for Zombie World, right? If I click on that, it will take me to the page where it has the description of that game. including the RSVP list and the wait list. And this is where you can do things like you can cancel out, you can see where you are on the waiting list. So, if I could have been, I was third on the waiting list, but, a week has passed and I come back here and I can see I've kind of gone up the chain because people have dropped out. Like Garrett said, we do send out notifications like a week before game and a day before game, but you don't necessarily get a notification for each minor change. If you go from waiting list spot 3 to 2, you will not get a notification for that. You should get a notification if you go from the waiting list into the RSVP'd, and now you are attending. That you should get a notification specifically.
Importantly, don't use the comment field because there aren't notifications going out to anybody when you use the comment field. Usually it's good to find a way to be able to get in touch with the game runner. And there's one of the notification emails gives you the email of the showrunner, the facilitator. And that is then the one best to use, or you use them on Slack or any other channel where you can find them. The organizer of the game, the event creator, has access to the email you provided and can contact you anytime through email.
Yep, no, great points. And part of the reason I wanted to make sure I had that comment on the screenshot, it looks like you can type things in there and everyone will get notified or something. That doesn't happen. So yes. So the other public forums that are out there, there's a couple. There is a Gauntlet G+ group, and let's cycle through these and take a look at them. The Gauntlet G+ group has been out there for a long time. G+ was the most active space for a while, especially before Slack kind of took its place for the core communication. Of course, G+ may be going away in the near future. There's been a lot of talk about that in 2019. So we are already talking about different options on where to move different aspects of the community. That's an ongoing discussion, so I have nothing to really add here. But you'll still find us there while G+ is around. There's also the Gauntlet Hangouts group. That's a different group, and this is people specifically only interested in the online games. And this is where it used to be organized long ago. Now, as we can see, games actually get posted in 2 places. At least that's been the rules recently. One is in the Slack, in the G Hangouts, and the other's here. Because people who are not in the Slack, who are just members of the Gauntlet overall community, but don't have high priority access, this is where they can see the games, right? And they can go in and then sign up a week later, when they have access to those games. So this is kind of the external place we post that. Again, that's going to change soon, but we'll talk about that when we have more information. So that's G+. There's also a Facebook group, which is called the Gauntlet Tabletop RPG Community. This is a group you can join. It's not very active as far as stuff on there, but there are certain kind of like ongoing notifications which happen, like the Gauntlet Hangout Roundup, which happens on the blog now. We'll point to that here, or certain big notifications from the Gauntlet community heads might come out here, but otherwise it's not a very active social media space. There's also the Gauntlet Gaming community page. This is an actual page versus a group. So this is kind of like the the front page of the community, and where you can get kind of official announcements, if you will. Again, not very active here, but that may change over time as G+ changes and other social media platforms change. There is the Gauntlet blog, which is something we hit a Patreon goal for earlier this year. So this has been going for a bunch of months now. And this blog just runs on an almost daily basis. We put out blog entries. Some of it is things like Lowell's Age of Ravens, any award-winning, I think it's any award-winning podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. Kind of fantastic. So that's part of the blog entries. You'll see posts from other members of our community that you might be familiar with, like Jason, or just lots of other members of the community. Garrett and myself have written blog posts. So you'll find some of those things out there, as well as kind of like the weekly roundup of videos, and other kind of cool stuff. So
I would say that was one of the most amazing additions to the Gauntlet this year, to have this blog. It's a daily blog, so much output is on there. And for community members, it's a wonderful way to get an audience for what you have to say. And it can be a supplement, it can be a play aid for online gaming, it can be your thoughts around like GM-less games or whatever it is. Usually Will Patterson, who is currently handling that, is then getting into interaction with you and then bringing it to a format that it can be published. And it's a great way for people who are interested in expressing themselves more online to make a first step.
Yep. And you know, just to that point, like one of the recent members who had joined only like 1 or 2 months ago had been writing about something that they were playing with and discovering, you know, around GMing, and they wrote a blog post about it, and it just went up there a week later, and it was fantastic. It was one of the most engaging pieces we've had in a while. So it is a way for newer members to kind of join and also be part of our community if this is something you're into, formalizing things like this. And then finally, we have here our Twitter, right? So the Gauntlet is very active on Twitter as of this year. So that's another place that you'll find us. A lot of the announcements and things will come out there. So if you are a Twitter person, this is definitely something to follow.
And don't forget, if you do something and are active on Twitter, do something related to the Gauntlet, to take the Gauntlet in. Jason is currently behind it, and he will definitely retweet it and give you a larger audience if that is what you're aiming for, or just bringing you into connection with other people who might be interested in. It's such an elegant way to get in touch with designers, with publishers, and whoever else is behind the game you just played.
Great point. And that is at Gauntlet RPG. So that kind of concludes this program. We've had about an hour to chat about different parts of the Gauntlet. Here's the two fantastic folks who were taking you on that tour. You can find our contact information there if you want to get a hold of us in either the Slack or the Twitter. I hope the Twitter part for you, Garrett, is not covered up, but if it is first initial and last name for Garrett, and for myself as well.
Coincidence.
So if there's no other further questions, I don't believe we have any.
Actually, I have noted down 2 points we should have mentioned or could have mentioned. First of all, the Gauntlet also has a fantastic YouTube site in which all the actual plays and podcasts are all gathered, well sorted by in lists and playlists and series and everything. So it's taken care of by community members, and it looks fantastic. And you find like to nearly every game you could imagine. You can learn about the game, look into it, what they do, how they run the game. It's a fantastic place. And very importantly, in Slack, we have the free version, which means that there is a message limit. And that is considered by some of us as a feature and not a problem, because it means that whatever you said half a year ago is not accessible that easily anymore. It's archived until we would go to a professional version of Slack, and that is far too expensive, and we are not going to do that in the next future. So whatever you wrote is not accessible anymore, which means nobody will point on you and saying, but you said whatever before. So the internet doesn't forget, but the Slack does. And it is at the moment a feature. If we grow even further, then we need to consider some other solution, because at the moment I think it's 2 or 3 weeks which are stored only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that end, I mean, you'll notice that we have been pretty cautious thus far as what we've been showing, even on these slides. Anytime we've been taking screenshots of Slack or whatnot, you'll notice we're kind of like blurring out people and information, because it is something that I think, as good citizens in the community, we definitely, view this thing as our just a private conversation. that is something we take relatively seriously. So it is considered a feature, not a bug, right? That the old messages go away. And in this this image here, I just went to the YouTube page, the Gauntlet YouTube page, and you can see some of the different playlists and GauntletCon, categories and all sorts of other games and playlists there. And there are hundreds. Cool.
Yeah, or thousands, I don't know.
So those were great. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say before we wish our friends goodbye?
Well, welcome to the Gauntlet.
Yeah. And we'll see you there in the Slack. Bye.
Goodbye.